Welcome to the Free Birth Podcast, a supportive space for people who are learning, exploring, and celebrating their autonomous choices in childbirth. Together, we'll unpack truths, share personal stories, and claim our ability to birth freely and intuitively. Here's your host, Emilee Saldea.
Hi everyone, today we have a special show. I have my beloved husband, partner, baby daddy, favorite person with me to do an episode on my pregnancy experience and how he has also experienced my pregnancy. So we have Jonny Jackson Saldea with us. Welcome, my love.
Hello, so very excited.
And this is going to be interesting because it's the first time I've done this with someone sitting next to me. So we're sharing a mic.
Very close.
Our mouths are very close to each other. So we'll see what happens.
Nothing new.
We did just eat some guacamole. Okay, so I have been wanting to do an episode this whole pregnancy about my experience and the story of our conscious conception and kind of what brought us to Maui as we are here now and my birthing time. And, a lot of people have asked and thought it would be fun to review everything, but I have been procrastinating it like crazy. So now that I'm almost 40 weeks, I figured if I had Jonny on, it would help make it happen. So here we are.
Motivator.
Yeah. Our story of conscious conception, where does it really begin? Because it certainly begins prior to the fertile week that created this baby. So we were thinking that maybe we would just kind of do a review of what brought us into the quote-unquote conscious conception time.
Yeah, our journey started quite a bit before that fertile week, mostly as an idea. We always knew that we were going to consciously conceive, and we always wanted to plan it, for the perfect window that fit our life most appropriately, like probably many people do. And as time went by, we kept saying, oh, well, next year will be better. Next year, let's wait till next year, that'll be better. And finally, it was on our honeymoon, I guess, just about 2 years ago, coming up this May, we were sitting on a beach at night and had a wonderful night together.
Here in Maui,
yeah. And we just decided that it's time. This is where we want to be. This is where we ultimately want to live, which we do now, thankfully. And this is where we, at the time, the idea was this is where we want to go be for the birth. Want to come a month early, stay a month after, and really settle in and spend a couple months just becoming a family of 3 instead of just the 2 of us.
Yeah, and it had been a fantasy of mine long before I had met Jonny to come here. And my father has lived here since I was in middle school, and so I've spent a decent amount of time here, and just always thought, especially as I got into birth work, what a healing, supportive, reverent space it would be to create this kind of time out of whatever normal life I had and come here in my birthing time and do postpartum here and walk the beaches, waiting for my baby. And it's a special place. If anyone's ever been here, it's paradise. It's a really special, slow-paced, gorgeous place. So
True that.
It's always been my fantasy, but I thought I didn't know if that would be a reality. And then cut to our honeymoon. We were talking a lot about it and, how can we give our children the best start possible? And for anyone who doesn't know, we were living in LA before. So I had known even, prior to being with Jonny, though I was living in LA, I couldn't really envision ever raising kids there. And I really wanted to give the space of pregnancy and postpartum the space to be sensitive. That's what came up a lot for me. Was LA is amazing and I love that city so much, but I found it really hard to allow myself to be sensitive there. I found that I had to be pretty tough and energetically guarded, and you deal with so much traffic and there's so many people, and I was working really hard and
a lot of energy there.
Yeah, so it's just a lot. And obviously my work is in birth, and so I knew that it's such a sensitive time, and just from my work, it seemed crazy to me to not take this super, super seriously and make it just the most special, easy time possible for our family. Postpartum is hard enough, and birth is hard enough just in a normal, supportive, loving environment. So what can we take out to make it the least stressful and the easiest as possible? So yeah, it's a great privilege that I can even think that way, and I'm really grateful for it. So with that, we were on our honeymoon. It was this beautiful night, and we just said, you know what, it's time. Our baby's ready. Let's just do it. And we mapped out a plan at 2 a.m. about how we were gonna get it done. And it was a 2-year-long plan that took quite a bit of effort and change and moving stuff around, and we made it happen.
And I'm lucky enough to work in an industry where I typically have a couple months off right at the end of the year. So we knew that our golden window was going to be from like December to February. So it's not like a huge amount of time. It's a couple windows, which means we've got to make it happen within a couple months. So what did we have? April and May, those were our target conception months.
Yeah.
So luckily we hit the latter of those two, which turned out to be the perfect window for us.
So after the honeymoon 2 years ago, we came back, and Jonny withdrew from school and put the word out to his community to find a job out in somewhere in nature. It was really important to me to get out of LA for the pregnancy, which he was totally down with. And so he got a job. We moved into the mountains of Northern California. And I, for the first time in my life, since I had left home at 16, was able to not work. And, prior to that, I had been attending 5 to 10 births a month. It was pretty crazy. And I was assisting a very busy midwife and running a nonprofit and my own, doula business. And Jonny was in school and working. And it was just a very full and busy time.
Hustle.
Yeah, total LA hustle. And we weren't saving any money, even though we were making pretty decent money with all of that work. So it was a total change of pace. And I knew, and I've probably mentioned this on the podcast before, I knew that I really needed to do a major recalibration of my nervous system prior to conception and then during the pregnancy, as I had spent, over a decade attending births, primarily in captivity, and had a lot of secondary trauma that I needed to process and look at and reconfigure, and certainly knew in my heart that I couldn't attend hospital birth with the amount of abuse and violence that I was seeing on the regular, with a soul growing inside of me. It's too much. I was maxed out. It felt like I was pretty much like it was breaking me. So honoring that, we got out of LA and he went to work, and I got to work from home for the first time. And last year, I got to work from home and started the podcast and transferred, all of my nonprofit stuff kind of to do it long distance, and still continued to go to LA almost every month to do that work. But we found a really nice balance, and it was amazing. One interesting piece that I'm really grateful for that I got to do prior to my moving up north was Jonny actually went up ahead. I had some births to finish in LA and lived with one of my best friends for a couple of months. So Jonny went up ahead and I had to finish some births, and then I was able to pull off doing something I had really hoped I would be able to do before I had a baby, which was return to India with 2 of my dear sisters. I went to India and Indonesia for about 6 weeks at the end of 2016, and I called it my maiden voyage, which what I meant by that was it was really the start of what, would then be a long process of saying goodbye to my maiden stage and going somewhere that was really special to me. I'd spent a long time in India when I was 19, and it really shaped a lot of who I have become. It's a really sacred place for me. I had gone there with my sister, and so I knew I wanted to return there, but I wouldn't bring a baby there, and just wanted to have a space where I could travel freely, as a wild woman with my wild sisters without any agenda, and really honor the final time I was probably ever going to travel without a baby and going somewhere that I probably wouldn't bring a baby. And without Jonny, to really do this as as a maiden. It was really, really, really cool. And, I was so grateful that I got to pull that off, and was gone for about 6 weeks and did
Yeah,
some
I just held it down in the
yeah,
super rainy, snowy
snowy.
winter in a cabin with very little cell phone service or internet.
Or joy. It was not an equal fair experience. Johnny really held it down while I got to go dance at sunset on the beach with my best friends
Yeah.
in the Gili Islands. But
Sounds chill.
it was amazing, as you know. So, really grateful I got to do that. And of course, that's quite extravagant. But, for anyone who is kind of in this conscious conception mode, I've heard a lot of women talk about just like a ceremony or a trip or, a weekend camping or whatever, something to really put like a stake in the ground to mark that this is the end of this phase, and to say goodbye to it and honor it and love it and enjoy it.
Yeah, it was more like a death of a maiden voyage.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It was beautiful. So then I came back, and we began, I was like a 3 month or something cleanse, which really just meant like not doing bad things.
Right.
We stopped drinking and smoking and coffee, and, just ate healthier, lowered our sugar intake, just like cleaned it up.
And a few like supplements. My favorite one that I always like to talk about of my own personal stash of supplements was this blend of Chinese herbs. I can't even remember exactly what they all are, but the name of the supplement itself was called Supreme Creation, and I was like, Supreme Creation.
Pretty boss.
Pretty boss.
He felt pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Taking those. Yeah, my acupuncturist had recommended that, and I don't
And it
remember.
worked.
They worked.
It was for sure the Supreme Creation.
Yeah, this baby was supremely created. You took some other stuff. We're gonna butcher all the names.
I don't
'Cause
remember
they're
anymore.
Chinese herbs. Well, one sounds like asparagus. It's like astragalus, but
Astragalus.
we shouldn't even try.
asparagus.
But it was cool. I'm so grateful to have a partner that doesn't shy away from all this stuff. And, I think a lot of women and men think that conscious conception is just about the woman doing that work and cleaning her own body and preparing her heart. And of course, that's not true. And if you're in a partnership and, the baby definitely wants the partner involved. But it was cool because it was more of a, it wasn't just a physical cleanse, and we didn't take it too seriously. It was
No,
just
it was pretty
kind of,
minimal,
yeah,
really.
like we knew we should do it anyway. But just to create a container around it, that was really what it was about, was giving ourselves some guidelines to say, okay, it's January, we're back together. We are going to start calling our baby in the spring. So let's start, compassing towards that and moving our ship towards that. And what is the most, like healthy environment that we could create
Yeah.
in our relationship, in our home, in our bodies, in our kitchen.
It was the intentionality of
Yeah.
it that was a big part of Supreme Creation.
It was beautiful. And we did a couple other more like spiritual things. We're part of a community that does meditative shamanic journeying in Northern California. And we work with these really powerful, incredible shaman women. So we went there to spend a weekend with them and just call upon the energy of our babies, and had a really powerful time kind of opening up that portal and just beginning, knowing that was in March. So knowing that the following month we were going to lift this veil. And, it felt really fun and really playful to be so intentional about it. None of it was like serious or pressure or any of that. It was just beautiful to acknowledge that, holy shit, for the first time in either of our lives, we were about to say yes to a baby and intentionally try, I hate the word try, intentionally welcome, and be ready for that if our baby was ready.
Yeah, it was funny, we kept saying, Emilee kept being like, I'm pregnanting.
Yeah.
Prior to conception, where we were setting that intention and working towards that goal, and that was our focus in our home, was we are opening this window, and we are opening ourselves to receive this. And, even weeks, months prior to actually saying, okay, now let's start with the really fun part.
And again, it just felt really respectful. Felt really respectful to each other and to this space and to our child that we really wanted to come join us. And how could we honor him or her, in a way that souls deserve? So that felt really fun and awesome. And then the following month, we did a child welcoming ceremony with a wonderful shamanic man at his home, and it was pretty trippy, and we just kind of went along with it. He had offered it to us, and right as we started to do it, the wind started, turning, and the birds started, flying around us. Do you remember that?
Uh-huh.
It was
We were
crazy.
doing a Chanumpa ceremony. Is that the right word?
I think
think
so.
so.
And we could feel them. We could really feel the babies. And I thought maybe just I could, because that wasn't my first time. But the man leading the ceremony opened his eyes and he's like, "You feel them?" And Jonny and I both were like, "Oh yeah." So that was pretty cool and fun. And again, like very playful.
It
And
was cool. I mean, it was just like a dude in Sacramento who's like a pretty remarkable dude.
yeah, he's not
nonetheless,
just
but,
a dude.
Um,
But it was a beautiful
it was
offering.
cool.
And yeah, again, it was just like these fun, playful little ways to start opening the portal and creating some sacred space around it. And then on my next fertile window, which was a couple weeks after that, that man had given us some ideas, and we had some ideas in the back of our head of things to do, kind of ritualistic things that we were going to call in. So we did some, again, it was all very lighthearted, but we had a candle that was specifically the babies.
And burned some special incense that we got
was
from
nice.
Greg. And
Yeah, we had special incense that was like fertility incense, and a special candle that we would light before we made love and pray to the baby. And it's very simple. Just, baby, we welcome you, and we're ready, and we're ready when you are, and we trust your path and your timing, and we're open on our end. So
yeah,
you come
it
when
was
you're
all
ready.
part of that intentionality. The incense and the candle and
The rose
and
baths.
the rose baths. It was all part of saying this is for a specific reason.
It was really cool. And, we've been together for almost 5 years, and the sex was really different. It was amazing. I mean, it's always been amazing, but it was like so powerful and so free and so heart connected. I mean, I remember just tripping out like,
Next
oh my
level.
God, my entire sexual life, I've never actually made love 100% open, because I've never wanted to conceive. And of course, that is a huge, I don't know if byproduct is the right word, but that's a huge part of sex that can or cannot happen. And I've never wanted to be pregnant before, like truly wanted it. And so a part of me energetically has always been like closed down. And I mean, understandably. And so, and probably in everybody who doesn't want to be pregnant, and to
Certainly.
and to experience, making love with my soulmate, and
With the intention of conceiving.
just to be completely open and free, and like nothing holding me back energetically. It was profound. I have thought about that and doing that for a long time, and had looked forward to it. So I remember even as a kid, I was like, that is the most romantic concept I can think of. But to actually do it, with the right person for me, and at the right time, it just, it was just such a gift to give myself and our family.
This was April.
When
we first did all of this stuff.
Yeah. So we had a great week, and I'm convinced that I got pregnant. I actually had an experience where I was laying down, meditating with the baby's soul, and I was just focused on my ovaries, and I already knew that at least the internet says that it takes about 40 minutes for the sperm to get to the egg. So I was laying there for about an hour and just praying to the baby and thinking about like what a crazy experience this was that I was calling in my pregnancy. And I felt this little explosion in my left ovary. I don't know how else to explain it. And I'm not usually a very like subtly sensitive person. But I felt something, and I woke Jonny up and was like, "Hey, I just got pregnant." And so do you remember that?
I do.
And so I'm pretty convinced that I did get pregnant, but it didn't hold. And we had a weird 2 weeks where I was like, God, I feel like I'm pregnant, but I'm not.
Well, your body started to respond in some ways too that were pretty indicative of pregnancy, but ultimately you bled again.
Yeah. And
We should probably touch on fertility awareness a little bit too, because when we were like the time frame we were shooting for was based very much on you having been tracking your cycle through those preparatory months, and as usual too. And so
and temping.
and just she was really paying attention to her body, of course. And so we, like, here's our target fertility window. So we started with super regular sex from a few days prior and during that window, and then a few days after, so we could try to hit the mark.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's worth mentioning. I used fertility awareness method for years prior to conceiving, to not get pregnant successfully. This is my first pregnancy. And I guess I didn't temp for a long time. I would track my periods, and then I started temping, and I had a pretty good idea of when I was fertile, but also with my cervical fluid and knowing how that changes.
And your cycle's pretty regular, so
Yeah.
it was somewhat predictable.
So I used it to not get pregnant for many years, and then used it to get pregnant quite quickly. So that happened. Then I wound up bleeding, and it was emotional, and it brought up all the, oh my God, what if this totally isn't going to be easy? And I always thought it would be so easy. And whatever. It was like a day of that. And then I got over it and returned to my trust. And Jonny made this sweet little altar for our babies and put their names on these rocks. And we spent the week prior to my next fertile window just meditating with them. And it was really cool. Like, we could feel them in the house, and we gave them a space on our mantle above our fireplace. And I don't know, it was kind of weird, but like, I was home alone a lot, and I would just walk by the altar and be like, hi babies, or just like acknowledge them. Or I've had a sense of the first one and her name. And so I would just like say hi to her and be like, we're ready, and just we just like kept the energy really alive. But again, without any like pressure or stress or anything weird.
We just were opening our lives to the idea of and the possibility of them joining.
Yeah. So then we hit the fertile week again and went for it, and it was awesome. It was super fun and a little different than the time before. But same thing, we just had sex every day in the whole week.
Well, this time we did it more. We had sex for a whole month every day.
Oh yeah, I was like, this time I'm not missing a day. When I stop bleeding,
there's no way to miss it.
We're going, because missing a day is not going to be the reason I don't get pregnant. Because the last cycle, there had been a day or two that he like stayed up at his work. He was working on a ranch, and he would stay up there, and I didn't go. And so we had missed a couple days in the month. And so I was like, not this month. Like, that won't be the reason. So that was super fun, because we had sex every day, sometimes twice a day. And that obviously helped. So, okay, so that was in May. And it was the first week of May. And we had kind of a dorky story about.
Okay, yes, we had sex every day. Yes, you were tracking your cycle. But I think what really clinched it, even beyond the supreme creation, was part of one of our like pre-coital rituals that we did. We burned the incense, and we had the candles and all that stuff too. And as we were getting ready for bed, we playing some groovy tunes. Don't remember what it was.
Oh, we were about to get in the shower.
Yeah, we were about to get in the shower, and then we just started to dance.
And we had read online that one of the suggestions for conscious conception rituals was like temple dancing for each other, which of course we thought was hilarious. And
I'm not sure what that is.
I don't even. Well,
we did some amazing interpretive.
So we had laughed that like dancing for each other would be very funny and actually not sexy, and that was not something that we had done. But then it kind of wound up being that the day we actually conceived, this like really good song came on, and we had a really big bathroom at that time, and we were naked in the bathroom about to get in the shower together towards the end of the night, and we just started dancing, and it was on Pandora, so it just kept playing good songs, and we danced for like a half an hour or something. And danced our asses off, and was just laughing and being silly and doing
mostly silly dancing.
for
It
sure.
wasn't like
Yeah, of course.
we're like at a dope party and
like
all
getting
your
low.
friends are there like looking
No,
good.
this was no one else should ever see what we did.
Totally.
But it was super fun and playful, and of course we were cracking up, and then we went and had sex after that, and did the same thing,
Who
like
wouldn't?
called in the baby, and that was that. So it was kind of funny because the one ritual we had read online that we were like, yeah, right,
We're like, I don't know, we'll probably pass on that one.
on like
And then,
temple dancing.
we did it, and we're pretty sure that was the night that we conceived.
Totally, which also, interestingly, is the same day that this podcast launched, which I didn't necessarily plan that way, but wound up that way, which is kind of cool.
On that day. How auspicious.
May 6th.
Wow.
So that was our conscious conception story, and I know a lot of people have contacted me, wanting to know more about conscious conception, because that's a really new concept, I think, to a lot of people, and I guess I just want to underline that it can look a million different ways. All it really means is that you're aware and intentionally calling in your baby.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of fun ways to do it. And so many women have done it in so many different ways that I've now heard since I've started sharing this story. But, hopefully partners can be involved in this too, because of course we need their one cell contribution and their energy and their spirit. And, it really was quite romantic.
But also I think what is needed is also that intentionality that partners can bring, and opening up the home to that, and being prepared to receive in a way. Like, yes, all I'm contributing is amazing dance moves and one cell, but the bigger picture of that is that I'm also creating the conditions for this to happen in conjunction with you.
And of course you're contributing so much more, because our baby's choosing you just as they're choosing me, and the way that you've nurtured me and all of my ideas with such openness and support.
You got good ideas.
Thank you. So that was conscious conception. Super fun. Highly recommend it. It can look a lot of different ways. And some of the stuff we shared, like, it felt silly to do, but I wouldn't change it for the world. We're not particularly like hippy dippy spiritual even people.
Yeah.
I guess it's all relative, but it felt really good to go there, and it felt really vulnerable. And
if you've got some incense, burn it.
Yeah. If you have a candle, light it.
Totally.
And I wasn't surprised that our baby came, because who wouldn't want to come party with that?
Totally. I'm going to have to look up what temple dancing is, but.
Well, temple dancing, I think, is like the beautiful dancing that women do usually in temples.
That is not what
not
we did.
the clockwork dancing or the.
We did bathroom dancing.
Yeah, we did private bathroom
What's
dancing.
the clockwork dancing?
You remember when you were
my
like...
dance moves? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're just going to pivot a little bit to the pregnancy. So I knew I was pregnant pretty quickly, because things changed really quickly. My breast started to feel different right away. I started peeing so much right away, which hadn't happened before. But I kept doubting myself, which I hadn't expected. And I didn't want to take a pregnancy test. I wanted to have a fully autonomous, hands-off, blah, blah, blah pregnancy, which shy of a pregnancy test I did do. But I really thought that I would have more confidence that I was pregnant. And I think because I had bled the month before, I was kind of scared to think I was pregnant if I wasn't. And of course, I didn't want to be disappointed.
And from my perspective, it seemed impatient too, that you were like, you wanted to know right now. And your body was telling us
everything.
I'm pregnant. But that was
like
the case the month prior.
My temp was still
Your temp was
high.
Up, and your boobs were hurting.
Yeah, at this point I should probably mention, though it's probably obvious since I host this podcast, we had been planning prior to conception that this would be a free pregnancy, that I would be choosing to not opt into any care other than self-care and Jonny care.
Jonny care.
Yeah. So part of that was, and you guys have listened to my podcast, you already know I was a birth keeper for a long time and really wanted nothing to do with the regulatory systems that oppress birth and women. So I knew that I would be doing this with myself as the leader, which is pretty much how I live in general about everything. So part of the beginning parts of this that were challenging was the pregnancy test. I didn't plan on taking one, and I had assumed that I would have complete confidence that I was pregnant. Like in Robbie Davis Floyd's book, she talks about how women only take pregnancy tests when they already know they're pregnant, which of course is not necessarily always true. But speaking to this need for validation and confirmation outside of ourselves, and I really wanted to test that and push those boundaries. So after we conceived, and there was a couple week period where it seemed like I was pregnant and my boobs were getting bigger and I was peeing all the time and I felt a little different. I couldn't decipher between being hopeful and what I was feeling. And I was temping and my temps were high, and but I was still right before my blood time. And finally, I actually got one.
But it was kind of like the whole, like, you were like, you were morally or ethically opposed to using the pregnancy test.
Yeah, because it represented the first step of giving away power to the technocratic model that you have to look outside of yourself for validation in a very internal experience. Yeah. So I was kind of like
you were kind of spinning out.
Yeah, I was going a little crazy and very impatient. And finally, Jonny, gave me great permission, which I really do appreciate. And he just kept being like, chill out, you're going to do this whole free pregnancy. This isn't harming the baby if there is one in any way, shape, or form. Just do it.
I don't view it as an intervention. I don't view it as assistance per se either, because it's something that you are wanting and administering it to yourself. I was like, dude, get the test.
Yeah. So I got a test, and it was funny. I remember being in the bathroom peeing on it, and he was in the bedroom right around the corner, and I was like, I've succumbed to the technocratic model. I'm giving away my power.
There may have been some tears around that.
I know, but it was like in between being serious and not serious, because obviously that was as far as I was going to go. But I have to say, I did it. It was positive, and I'm super stoked I did it. And I think I did like 2 more. I could have done them every day.
You did 3.
I loved it. And I still love the idea of doing one.
Don't you still have one of those?
Mm-hmm. I love the idea of, having a pregnancy without it. That's like on my bucket list, but I had to just give myself some slack and chill out. And, it was awesome. Then I put it on the kitchen counter, and it was actually really helpful in those first couple of weeks, when it's still really heady and you're just like, wait, what? And especially your first pregnancy ever, it just didn't feel real or true. And so I kept walking by the test and would look at it. I mean, I would look at it like 20, 30 times a day.
You're like, oh, yep, no, still
pregnant. There's still a line. And it felt really exciting and was helpful. So anyway, I know it's like way more like out there than probably most people have ever given it a second thought, but it was something I had to just get over and let go of.
Well, glad I could help.
Yeah, thank you, honey. So the first trimester was pretty straightforward. I felt great for 6 weeks, and then right as the clock struck 6 weeks, I went down for about 6 weeks, maybe 7. And
a little brutal.
Yeah, I mean, nothing uncommon. I never threw up.
I don't think you threw up one time.
Yeah, very grateful for, because that's no bueno. Shut up.
Weeks.
Well, yeah, I'll probably throw up in labor, but I went down for about 6 to 8 weeks, and I don't know. I mean, a part of me was going to say it was kind of brutal, but not really. It felt like exactly what it was, which was my body protecting itself and wanting to eat very little and very bland. And thankfully, I do have the respect for the process, and I was so grateful to be pregnant. And the whole thing's just so exciting because I wanted to be pregnant in particular. And I guess I have to say that the best part is that I had orchestrated my life to be in a place where I could just rest, which most women do not get that opportunity. And so, I mean, I had about a month where I just felt horrible and I just stayed in bed.
Yeah, you slept a lot.
Yeah, I slept even more in the second trimester, but I just chilled out and I did podcasts when I wanted to, and I worked from my bed, and hardly could eat anything. And like weirdly, my go-to was the Caesar salad kits, which I haven't eaten since high school, but it was weirdly like one of the only things that didn't sick me out. And I mean, I had days where Johnny would come home from work and he would feed me while I laid down because I just couldn't even bear to lift my head. But
And it's tough at that stage because you're feeling so nauseous and nothing sounds good to eat, but almost without fail, getting some food into you, the right
Yeah.
kinds of foods, almost always made you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like
Ass
almost like a,
backwards.
yeah, it was like a test of will to get the food, protein stuff that we could muster into you as best we could, and you would almost always feel better.
Mm-hmm. But I was grateful to know that, you know, baby gets what they need and it's all good. This was totally normal, and it never felt like I never complained about it. It was just like, wow, what a new and weird experience. But yeah, cruised through that. I taught a couple trainings in that time, which was a little hardcore, to feel like I was going to throw up while I was teaching a class. But whatever, women do way more. I mean, I
Right.
just kept thinking about women who have multiple kids and who, I mean, some of my friends were telling me stories about how they would like show up at work and just quickly puke in the basket before they'd walk into their shift. And, I just, every day I thanked my lucky stars that I didn't have to be in that position this time. Who knows what it'll be like second time around and with multiple kids and once I'm working again, in like a more real way.
I want to tell a story about the first trimester.
Okay.
I remember another thing that happened for you and for me in the first trimester was you started to get this like aversion to touch. And we had this routine where I would get up before she did, even before the massive amounts of sleep you were getting during the first trimester. And when I'd get ready for work and whatever and do my thing, and then when I was leaving, I'd come in to say goodbye and give you some kisses or whatever, and be sweet while you're like half asleep. And I remember a few times where you were just like, get off me. There were a couple times when I would go and kiss and you just like startled awake and like face pushed me away.
Yeah, like I was repulsed.
I was like, oh, okay, well, have a good day.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Sorry, ma'am.
Yeah,
I
that
thought you were
was
someone
weird.
else.
That was weird. Or in the morning, like before you get up, if you tried to spoon me, at 5 or 6 a.m.,
Yeah.
I was like so repulsed by being touched. It was really, really weird because that has never happened to me, well, by anyone, but definitely by you.
Yeah.
That was super, super weird.
I didn't take it personal.
I know, you're good at
I
that.
was just like, whatevs.
And it went away.
I gotta go anyway.
Well, and a lot of women say that happens once they're breastfeeding. They get so touched out.
Okay, I'll look out for that.
Yeah, having a baby on them constantly, that more
Right.
touch is like,
You have your other
you just like max
full-grown
out.
man baby on you too.
Yeah. So, good story, bro.
Great, totally. Yeah.
Oh, another thing I did want to mention that was kind of crazy was around 12 or 13 weeks, I had a almost drowning incident.
Oh, yeah.
We had gone tubing on a whitewater river, and I had accidentally flipped out of the tube, and it was really scary, and there was a bunch of rocks, and it obviously worked out, and I didn't get too beat up, but it was one of the only things that's happened in the pregnancy where I was like, is the baby okay? Or like, I never really thought like, should we go get an ultrasound? But I definitely was rattled and
Yeah.
was like, I mean, my belly didn't hit the rocks, but, and I didn't go unconscious, but pretty much shy of those two things happening. Everything else happened. I definitely got held under and was incredibly shaken.
It was
and
scary.
It was really, really scary. But it was really the only thing that made me think, okay, so something could have happened, and what do I do now? And all that an ultrasound would do for me is just show me if the baby, had died or not. It wouldn't even show at 12, 13 weeks if it was like injured or something. It would just
Right.
show like a heartbeat or not.
And it wouldn't change.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is ultrasounds don't change outcomes. Well, they could if negatively, but
Sure.
they don't, the only information they give you is there a heartbeat today? In this exact moment, is there a heartbeat? And so, yeah, that was a little like confronting and I was a little worried, but the reality is babies are incredibly protected and they're meant to withstand a lot. And of course, we were fine. So
But we never went back to that river
we
again.
never went back to that river. I was done with that freaking river that tried to kill me and my baby.
It was our safe space for a while.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was first trimester. It was pretty straightforward, pretty common. And it didn't really get super heady for me until second trimester because all my symptoms went away. And I think the hardest part of the whole pregnancy was around 14, 15, 16 weeks before I could hear the heartbeat on the Fetus Scope and before I was showing, really not trusting that I really was pregnant. And, some of I in the birth world, I also work in the non-live birth world. And that's a large part of what my nonprofit does is supporting women having non-live birth outcomes through abortion, miscarriage, and stillbirth. And so, I was talking with women every week and connecting them to full spectrum doulas and, talking with women all the time about their losses. And many women that I knew throughout, well, my whole time working in birth, but also in my pregnancy, I was assisting women who found out that they had lost their pregnancy and was going to go, it would take a month to pass the pregnancy. So that was really tripping me out, that I was about to release to the world that we were pregnant in a really excited way. And I hadn't had anything super validated externally. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just had a couple of weeks there where, when I would meditate, I would just cry and I would feel these waves of worry and self-doubt and like, oh my God, what if I'm over here thinking I'm pregnant and really the fetus has passed and I am, gonna like find that out because it can take many weeks to pass a lost pregnancy or unviable pregnancy. It was really like weird. It kept coming up for me. But that was that, and we went through it, and
that wasn't going to change our desire to let it be what it is.
Totally.
That wasn't going to drive us to go
do anything
break out
different.
the Doppler or
Ew, no. Yeah, totally.
Anything like that.
It was just like another layer of surrender, and this
and trust in
whatever it is,
and your body to do it well if it needs to do it well, and
just letting go. And I mean, that's what everyone says, right, about pregnancy and parenthood, and it's just returning to that space of letting go and surrender. And this is a lot of the work of free birth, is that you don't just run to a doctor to get an ultrasound, or you don't just pull out the Doppler or whatever, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. That's just not my interest at all. That's not where I wanted to go spiritually, and it's not what I wanted to do to this baby. And it was deep. It was hard and deep, and it was not easy for a couple of weeks.
And I think that's a reoccurring theme that I hear from listening to a lot of the stories on this podcast, is I think that there's a misconception in the world that free birth and mamas are fearless or ignorant, and I have found it often to be the opposite, where they're the most informed, which is why they're choosing what they're choosing, and they're not fearless. It's just a way of embracing that fear or riding that fear or trusting through it. And I think that was a really good example of that fear coming up for you, or that unknown, that anxiety around the unknown, and being able to navigate that through.
And I remember having this real epiphany around that time. I was on my yoga mat and I was holding my womb and crying and feeling a lot of new stuff. And I just realized, like, this is never going to end. The opportunity to worry about my baby is just beginning, and that this is actually like the easiest part to worry about, because at some point I'm going to worry about the party she went to or the company she chooses, or if she's going to come home, in one piece. Like, that's the real shit once your baby's outside and they're people of the world. And I just like realized like, oh, this is becoming a mother, to sit in the not knowing and to feel worried and fear and doubt and all of and like guilt, like I had been drinking caffeine for some migraines that I had been having, which was not my intention with the pregnancy, and I just wound up really needing it to cope. And I felt really bad about it. I still feel bad about it because that was not in my what I believe to be in the best interest of the fetus. But I did it anyway because I just needed to. And yeah, like I've never felt that stuff before. I've never really felt guilt. I've never really felt self-doubt. I've never really felt worry. I know it sounds really crazy, but it's just kind of like not really who I am. So, it was about welcoming in that work and sitting with it and knowing that this is just beginning, because once you get through one part, then there's a next thing to worry about. And every stage of the pregnancy has brought up a plethora of things I could worry about. Now I'm on the verge of birth. So if I wanted to go there, which I don't, there's obviously a long list of things I could be worried about. And then what about when the baby's here? Like I said, that's like when it really gets popping.
Yeah. And that's, I think, as you said, like that's the work of an unassisted pregnancy, through my eyes at least, is that when you give up the decision making and you give up the knowledge base to some other provider, you are disassociating yourself from the responsibility in a way where you are not as in touch with maybe the process or what you're putting into your body. You're trusting what other people are telling you, that it puts a barrier between you and the intuition that you have around the pregnancy
That you could have.
that you could potentially have. Or certainly the responsibility is all on your shoulders, and that can carry a certain weight when no one else is looking out for the pregnancy but you.
I had a mantra around that time, which was, something's moving inside me and my stomach is growing and I haven't bled. And anytime I doubted, like, is this really a pregnancy? Is this really a baby? I was able to say that to myself once I could start to feel movement. And it's like the simplest mantra ever, but you can't really argue with that. Like, literally, what else would it be? So, I mean, the next question would be like, is it intact and does it have all of its faculties? But at least we know I am definitely growing a baby of some kind, which was comforting in the second trimester. Do you remember when we first heard the heartbeat with the Fetus Scope?
I don't know if I do remember.
Because we tried like every night for a while, around 15 weeks. I should have written all this down, but yeah, I think around 16 or 7. It was 17
I think
weeks.
you found it first.
Yeah, probably. But that was really fun to start hearing it, and I think it happened around 17 weeks. A lot of people say to hide the Fetus Scope until 20 weeks so that you don't get worried if you can't find it. I'm quite convinced I have an anterior placenta because I've had pretty muffled movement and found the heartbeat a little bit on the later end. But
Plus, the placenta sounds louder on that side too.
And it doesn't like echo. But it was really fun to try, and it was fun to not hear it and to just get familiar with all the other sounds going on in my body.
A lot of stuff going on.
Because we could hear the placenta before the heartbeat. And just to kind of like, I don't know. I mean, a lot of you probably listening have done this, but it always feels to me when I put the Fetus Scope on like I'm diving down underwater and I'm like going into this other place.
Totally.
Isn't it kind of like
totally.
that? And it has to be silent and you have to shove those things in your ears and everything's so subtle and it takes a minute to adjust to it. But once you're like in it, you're just kind of like in this other world. You have to close your eyes and figure out what you're hearing. And then, you finally hear that little hummingbird, pitter patter thing. And it's just unreal. And it's so much cooler than a Doppler.
Cool.
I think, because it's like, you're actually hearing the real.
On the internet, but yeah, it's
well, and it's
amazing.
An echo, whereas you're hearing with a Fetus Scope, you're hearing the actual sound.
Interesting.
Anyway, so that was really sweet. There's a little ritual that we did just to hear the baby's heart, and it was fun. And then it kind of ran its course, and once I started showing, I was like, I'm good, and we hardly listened.
We would listen like
every
when
couple
you were
weeks.
like, I haven't felt the baby today.
Yeah.
So we'd go listen,
or a couple
and there
days.
it was, or
Yeah, so then I started feeling her move, and that was super fun, and started to get more and more obvious. And I was pretty much a shut-in throughout the summer. I mean, legit. I didn't have any
Yeah.
friends where we lived, and we wound up having to be down to one car, and so it was so hot. It was like 105. I mean, it was gnarly, gnarly hot, and I was in my second trimester, and so I just pretty much slept. I mean, I legit was sleeping 12, 14 hours a day. It was amazing.
It was a lot, and I mean, you're a sleeper,
I'm
but
already a sleeper. Yeah,
it was like,
it was extreme.
okay, someone needs to step in and physically take you out of the house for a walk. So that's
Yeah.
that's what
After
we
it
did.
had been a couple days, I'd get a little weird. I mean, I didn't think I was getting weird, but Jonny would be like, "Okay,
All
you're
right,
getting
let's
weird."
go interact with other humans
Yeah,
or animals outside, literally anyone.
I know. We'd see more animals where we lived than people. So anyway, it was really hot and slept an insane amount, but second trimester was chill. Really didn't have any bad things with it at all, except for the migraines.
But that was kind of early on. I think like later in that
Well, it's
phase.
because I was on caffeine.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't
Yeah.
really get off it. And then we just kind of shifted into trying to finish the year, getting Jonny's job done, and started to pack up the house in the fall. And it started to all get really quite real that we were going to actually try to pull this crazy plan off.
Oh, right. And I guess it should be said that at the start of the pregnancy, we were just planning to be in Maui for the birth and shortly thereafter postpartum. But as the year went on, we were like, why don't we just not come back? Why don't we just stay there?
And we realized that
This is where we want to be.
Yeah, the only reason that we were thinking about coming back was ultimately scarcity consciousness. It was like fear, because really we've always wanted to live here. This is where we want to be. This is where we want to raise our kids. We love this place. And it was kind of just upper limiting, just being like, oh, well, we couldn't pull that off, or that's too hard. And, everybody probably wants to live in Hawaii, but it's not that simple. And we finally were just like, but what if we could? What if we really, really, really actually could just stay? And what if the island would accept us and we could find work? And we just took the leap. And so we aligned with that. And
that pretty quickly turned into, we are going to take the leap.
Yeah.
And we did. So by the time, the year was winding down, we had already committed in our hearts that we were going to take that leap. And we were just going to come here for the birth and not go back.
And do our best, at least.
And do our best.
And see if the island will keep us.
Yeah.
So to be determined, since we've only been here for a month. TBD. We wrapped everything up, packed the house, put everything we owned in storage, shipped over 2 boxes, brought over 4 bags, and showed up in Maui.
With no place to stay beyond the place we had booked for.
Oh yeah,
the
we had no idea what we were
remainder
going to
of the
do.
month of December.
So we had an Airbnb booked for December, and we just got to work. So we showed up here, and it was super rainy and weird vibes, and it's tourist season in December, and it was so hard to find a place, and we hadn't emotionally prepared for that. And and I had no idea what my third trimester was going to be like, because second try was super chill, and I felt great and mostly felt like myself.
Most of the third was
The
pretty
beginning
chill
part,
too.
yeah. I mean, it's still been chill, but anyway, but finding a place and having that be really challenging. There was so few places available here, and of course the prices are insane, which we had prepared for, but you got to like learn a new place, and this wasn't a place that we knew the ins and outs of. We've only ever been here as tourists, and so there was a pretty big learning curve of like what to look for and how to assess the right place, and
like what part of the island we wanted to be, and the price range, and
the whole thing was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So I definitely had some like dark nights of the soul of being like, this isn't going to work, and
only a couple.
oh yeah, a couple.
I gotta say, you've been crushing this pregnancy.
Thank you.
As far like,
But for me
I've heard
to
no
doubt
complaints.
my plan,
It doesn't
I
happen
like
all that
never
often.
do that. But I think it was
You make good plans.
Thank you. It was the culmination of the end of my pregnancy, and trying to find not only where we were going to live, but where we were going to birth,
Right.
and where we were going to do postpartum.
No
and
pressure.
Yeah, this is a big deal, and we knew we wanted it to be really private, and I ideally would have a place where I could be outside, and a lot of places here have multiple buildings on one piece of land, and we didn't want to deal with anyone else. We didn't want shared walls. we actually experienced some prejudice with the baby and people not wanting, a couple that's about to have a baby to move in. So yeah, it just took a while, and interestingly,
And there's not a lot of options.
Yeah, there
and
really
it's
wasn't.
pretty competitive. So
Interestingly, right before we found the place, at 36 weeks was the 36-week breakdown. And it was really the
classic 36-week breakdown.
It was really the only breakdown I've had this whole pregnancy. And from what I've heard since then, it's apparently quite common. But yeah, a lot of women have said that the same thing happened to them. Cool. But I fully went into, I don't want this baby. What were we thinking? I've made a terrible mistake. Why did you believe me that we should do this?
It's true, that didn't happen.
I was like, I just want to take drugs and go to Burning Man and move back to LA and go dancing with my friends, and just was like, what am I doing? And I think, the clock turning 36 changed a lot for me, and it made it like clicked into people birth at 36. People birth normal, healthy babies. And
plus you had a friend who was tracking about the same
who had her
weeks
baby
of gestation with you, who had her baby like right before that or right around that time.
It just made it real.
Shit got real.
Yeah, in a whole new way. And that I really was like, oh, I'm now in my birthing time, and now I need to just be like ready. And we don't have a house. And this was harder than we had planned. And what was I thinking, moving to a random tropical island away from everywhere that we know, at the end of my pregnancy with no friends around? And it's just a total dark night of the soul. And I was just crying and, feeling very, it was like shifting from it being conceptual to being very real. And I don't know what I thought I would feel, but what I was feeling was that I didn't want this, and I didn't feel connected to the baby. I couldn't envision the birth. It was rough. I was just crying, and I remember just laying on the bed being like, will you love the baby when I can't? And thankfully I have a wonderful partner, and he was just like, I'll love the baby twice as much on the days that you can't. And you don't have to love your baby every day. He's just saying.
Seems like a tall order.
It's a tall order.
I feel like you could take a few days off.
He just, was wonderful and held the space. And of course I moved through it. And like the next day we found the perfect place, or maybe it was 2 days later or something.
Shortly.
And we worked out the perfect place and moved in on New Year's Eve, and needed to rehabilitate my body a little bit that week because I way overdid myself, and that was now 37 weeks or so, and I kind of strained my back and was scared that I was going to go into labor not feeling that physically great. But a couple days of rest and a nice massage and blah, 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 I was fine. And now I've just been kind of like coming around to it. I think part of this, what's the right word? Gloom is too dramatic, but part of this ambivalence that I've been feeling definitely has to do with acknowledging and mourning this maiden that I have loved so much, and I have had such a great time with her. And, I've been on my own since I was 16 and just have had a blast. And I was in the circus, and I've traveled the world, and I've had crazy partners, and just the whole thing. I've lived all over, and I've run businesses in LA, and I've made tons of money and lost lots of money, and I've just had like a wildly fun, adventurous, privileged life.
And we've had a pretty sweet run as a couple too.
Hell yeah, totally.
That is going to be drastically altered anytime
tonight
now.
Yeah.
And that's, that was, at least for me, a similar realization that it's like not just going to be you and I anymore.
Yeah, and totally mourning that. That's sad.
It's going to be a third, because we have a good time, and I love the dynamic we have. I love the life that we have together, and I'm sure that I'll love the life we'll have with whoever comes out of you, but it's going to be different, and it's going to be drastically different.
So have you been like scared or worried about that like I have? Because you've seemed like pretty confident and grounded the whole time.
Yeah, I have, sure. I mean, that's kind of my, and everyone's always like, "Oh, you're ready to be a dad." It's like the only thing that have had any doubts about being ready about would be the altered dynamic, that going from you and I, who are able to change our life pretty drastically anytime we want to move somewhere, we move, we want to do something, we do it generally.
Yeah.
And we're both able to make money, and we're both able to sort of have some independence, that this will change that dynamic drastically. So, you know, but
it is what it is.
now you have an opinion about it now, huh?
Yeah. That's one of our classic lines in our family is we just say there's no use in having an opinion on it when it's something you can't change, because it's true.
That's just almost like the fear of the unknown.
Totally.
Talking. Because it's probably going to be more awesome. And it may not change some things as drastically as I think it will. I don't know. It'll undoubtedly change a lot, but I don't know what that's going to look like. I've never had a kid with you before.
Yeah, and I think with my work in the birth world and having supported and, you know, seen so many families and moms, I'm not disillusioned about how big of a transition this is. And so many women mourn their maidenhood after the fact because they had no idea that it was going to be how it is. And I feel like I got kind of a jump start on that.
Yeah.
You know, even with like taking that trip, you know, a year ago, being like, I'm going to start this shit now. Yeah, because I know everything's going to be different. I don't know what different that will be. But yeah, anyway, just being present with that and acknowledging it. And I hope it'll soften the blow. I think it probably will.
I think it will.
Anyway, and then we had, I mean, so that pretty much brings us up to now. We're here, we're settled. We have a wonderful house that we are totally grateful and stoked to be in. And now I'm almost 40 weeks and we're just chilling. You know, Jonny was able to, or we were able to have savings coming over here from the job that he had this year. So this was exactly what we planned and created, was to, you know, do this previous year and live really cheaply and work really hard and put away money so that we could come here and just check out for a couple months before we needed to start, you know, making an income again. And just be fully present and not have the dad that has to go back to work at 2 weeks and the mom that has to work up until the day she's in labor. Right. And I have so much empathy and compassion for those situations. And I know it is from such a space of privilege that we were able to orchestrate this in the way that we did and with such intentionality. And honestly, a lot of it I think comes down to priority. Like, this is the biggest priority for both of us and has been since we got together.
And we've been slowly tweaking and moving our life to manifest this situation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we're not blessed and we're not privileged. It just means that we've been able to work with those blessings in a way that gets us to this point.
Yeah, and that this was our biggest priority.
Totally.
Like, more than owning a house or whatever, lots of other things that are great to prioritize. But, you know, a lot of this, I might have said this in the beginning, but a lot of this for me comes down to, I want this to be as easy as possible. I want this to feel as good as possible. I want this to be as joyful and as little stress as possible. And so this is the plan we created. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm feeling really set up. And
so far so good.
Yeah, so far so good. So now we're just having a wonderful time here, having slow days and being cuddly and, you know, exploring the island and drinking a lot of tea and going to these special places, you know, around here. And it's the first time ever that we aren't working and busting our asses and just like totally shifting into a downshift where we are just with each other and connecting. And
it's a totally different lifestyle that is not going to last forever.
No,
but
this is total fantasy land, what we're doing right now. It's a total
different lifestyle than we've led before.
Yeah.
Certainly as in partnership together. But I can't think of a more special way for this transition to take place during this fantasy land that we've created.
Well, we're never going to get this time back. You know, that's the thing. Like, well, this is so sacred that we've carved out this space and that we have it carved out for postpartum. we're never going to get that back. Our baby's only going to be a baby, one time. We're only going to have one baby one time. And this is our last couple days or weeks of being a couple. And we really like each other and love being together. And, we spent a lot of time apart our whole relationship.
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of time apart because of jobs and traveling and all sorts of stuff. And to just be fully present with each other and get as emotionally ready, and great.
And just really tune into each other completely too, and sync up as best we can. It's pretty amazing.
So
It's a good time.
we're gonna pivot to some questions that we wrote out for each other. Some of these are questions that people actually have emailed me or asked me on Instagram. So I thought they'd be fun to weave into the end of our podcast. So some questions for Jonny. So has your feelings around supporting my autonomous birth changed at all in this pregnancy?
I would say they have only changed in the sense that I am more clear that this is the right way for our family. To expand on that, I would say that, as we mentioned before, we set out for this to be an unassisted pregnancy and birth, and at least unassisted from the sense of no medical intervention or technology or anything like that whatsoever. And truthfully, a lot of the strengthening of my confidence has come through listening to a lot of the stories on this podcast, where I know I've told you this a bazillion times off air, but those stories are so important in normalizing this process. And I had no idea how many people, I thought we were like these radical, birthers, and it turns out that though there is some truth to that, we're not the only ones. And hearing these stories and being in the room for, you being around these big Facebook groups and Instagram and things like that, where there's a lot of these stories being told, it's really shown me that this isn't that crazy. And of course, intellectually, I am aware that this is kind of the way it's always been, and that your bodies are designed for this to work. But to know that there are many other people out there that are going through this process, and the success stories of women, like free birth VBACs and stuff like that is so cool to hear about. But anyway, yeah, so these stories have really shown me how normal it is, and that normalization is important, I think, for everyone.
And I think because you've been with me as a doula, you've seen years of me coming home so traumatized from the violence that I've seen and the way women have been treated and the way the babies are treated. And, you've held me, in your arms while I've just cried and cried and cried about the violence that I've seen.
Right. And for someone, I'm speaking of, for someone who's never actually seen a birth in person, I'm very familiar with hospital birth culture through you, of course, and other birth worker friends that we have. And, there's no part of me whatsoever that wants to put my lady and my baby through that situation at all. I mean, it would have to be life or death situation.
Totally. Which is what they're good for.
Which is what Western medicine is great for, is trauma. And
yeah. So how do you think the birth's going to be?
I think it's going to be juicy. I think
it'll definitely be juicy.
I think it's going to be less dramatic than I think it will be in my mind, or than the idea of childbirth is. Because it's going to be our music with the birth playlist that you've put together, and candles, and, most likely at least one or more of your sisters here. And, we're setting up a birth playground with the silks and the tub and, and the shower or whatever it is. And I think it'll go well. And everything that I've read, heard, seen of physiological childbirth, that juiciness I was referring to is like that flush of hormones. And there's a real sensuality to it that's blows my mind, because 5 years ago it was like, you know, the almost like parody version of it, where it's
In your mind, you mean?
you know, yeah, in my mind, like the whole way that the media or the movie industry portrays it, where it's a medical emergency every single time, and if you don't get to the hospital, it's like a
The
tragedy.
screaming hysteria.
Screaming hysteria, and yeah, I think it's gonna go great, and I totally trust you, and I trust your body, and I trust the preparation that we've made, and I mean, it's designed to work.
So what do you see as your role in the birth?
My role is obviously from a support standpoint. You know, I mean, it's kind of as much or as little involvement from me as you want. You know, I'm here to be your rock as always, and I don't know, you might not want me in the room, or you might just want me laying on the bed near you, or you might want me compressing your hips, or yeah, I don't know. I'm mostly just here to do whatever or as little as you need.
Just like bear witness.
Yeah, and hold space.
So what intimidates you, if anything, about doing this at home without any medical management and being an hour from the hospital and it just being us plus a friend or something? Does anything come up for you about that?
Well, what comes up for me is probably related to me as a man, of what if something happens that I'm not able to control, or what if there's something that needs to be done that I can't do. But then I really instantly come back to, well, I can't really do anything. This isn't the place where I have any control, and I'm here to hold space and bear witness, like you said. But you know, what's intimidating is that, like, this is not a man's space. This is a woman's space. And
I have to say, because you understand that, that's why you're welcomed in it. Truly. I mean, I couldn't imagine having a baby with someone that didn't get that. But you have such a deep understanding that this is mine, and this is something I'm going through. And of course, you're going to go through it by witnessing, but you're not going through it.
No.
It's not our birth. It's the birth of our baby.
Totally.
But it's my birth, and it's what I'm doing and what I've chosen. You know, and it breaks my heart that that's so hard for so many men to understand. I mean, I hear
we're programmed to fix it and make it better and make it work
and be in charge.
And be in charge.
That's the other big piece.
Yeah.
And be responsible and yeah.
But really, none of that applies.
No, this is women's work. Duh, because only women give birth. You know, women own birth, and this is our space. And I think to be invited into it is really sacred, and it's so important to know what your role is in that. You know, which could look a lot of different ways, but I do think it fundamentally comes down to knowing that this is mine, and that's like the best thing that you can bring into this, is to not assert yourself into it as yours.
Yeah.
Which you've done so perfectly.
And my role is to trust and to support and to hold space.
So what would you say to partners who are having a hard time supporting home birth or free birth? You know, it's something that is so common. I hear about it and see about it and have women contact me almost every single day about how can I get my partner to come around, you know, to home birth or free birth. And I'm wondering what you would say, any wisdom of how you've come around to it.
The way I came around to it was kind of a long and winding road that primarily was me witnessing your going to a lot of births, primarily hospital births, and seeing the trauma there and starting to understand the reality of the birth culture in hospital and the way that regulations constrain mothers, and that it is not mother and baby led, that it is obstetrician led, and the next step being even regulated midwifery being led by the state. Those regulations really restrict the scope of care that these women are able to give. And the biggest piece of advice I could give would be to get educated on what hospital birth looks like, and really just getting an understanding of what physiological birth looks like and what unassisted birth actually looks like, and the horror stories of women dying in childbirth until doctors could save the day is really more myth than reality. And actually, if you really look into it, it's more of a propaganda scheme than anything else. But the difference between intervention-led birth and physiological-led birth is night and day.
And the long-term effects of that on a family.
Totally.
I mean, and I think also I'll just chime in and say, you've followed my journey with coming into free birth. We met. I wasn't into it yet. I didn't know a lot about it yet. When we first got together, I was a doula who, of course, loved home birth and worked for a CNM, fairly medical midwife. And it wasn't until probably 2 years ago that I started to align with this idea of a fully autonomous pregnancy and birth. And so you were such a part of my journey,
Right.
and processing with you, and playing out all of my different options. So that is something I would say to partners is like, your woman's the leader, and if she's being called to free birth, she's doing it from a real intuitive, maternal, like deep knowing and curiosity. And that's something to trust. And that's something that no one takes lightly. It is not easy to go against the grain. It is so much harder. It is not easy to opt out of the medical model and like explain yourself to your community. And it's not easy to take a stand in something that has been so successfully stolen from us. So it takes a lot of courage, for a woman to stand in this and to be drawn to this. And as we know, if anyone's listened to this podcast, a lot of women are drawn to free birth from previous trauma, and just wanting the chance to have a normal birth. And that is so likely and so possible. And there's such a protective nature to normal physiological birth. But it does require a lot of unprogramming and learning, and I was going to say education, but not necessarily. I don't believe that you have to be super educated to pick a free birth.
No,
birth happens one way or another.
Well,
you don't have to know anything.
I suppose when I was using the term educated, really what I meant more was informed.
Yeah.
And I think to piggyback on that a little bit, the next facet that's important as far as advice I would give to partners or anyone who's fearful of it would be to listen to these stories and listen to unassisted birthers and really see for yourself how normal it is and how well it actually works when left alone. And to me, that was the biggest confidence booster in this whole process. As much as I trust you and love you, and I know cerebrally that it can work, hearing it over and over and over from all of these different women and all over the place, different walks of life, people that are similar to us, people that are totally different, it's all happening the same way when left alone. And that was huge for me. So
right,
that's what I would encourage.
We have to totally replace the narratives that have been fed to us since we were born.
Yeah.
Of these last couple generations. I mean, we've only been birthing in captivity for a very, very, very short amount of time. But if it's what we know, and if it's what our most recent lineage knows, you kind of have to intentionally reprogram that. And you have to be willing to do it, which I think a lot of partners, it's just like, they don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing the work and for your open mind.
Yeah, my pleasure. How about you? Do you have any fears coming up around this, or as broad or as specific as you want?
Not really. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't feel any fear about the birth. I was tripping on, like, does my baby have a face? And
Right.
are its intestines inside its body kind of stuff? Just because I only know that I think everything's okay, but you don't know till you know. But I think that's why I've switched into this kind of stoic, ambivalent kind of space where I'm like, yeah, I could just be pregnant for another year and I don't really know what's about to happen. Just kind of switched into a different space of I don't know. And that's all, that's like the best I can do right now. And I don't need to know. I don't need the reassurance. The biggest thing I've come to about any fears that have come up is I know that I have the resources within myself to deal with whatever happens. Literally, whatever happens. I just know that I do. And I trust myself and our relationship and my support system to deal with anything that this life brings me. So that's kind of what I always come back to. And I'm not a very fearful person. I don't think fearful people probably choose this path, like people who are dominated by fear. Yeah, I feel like I'm down with birth decimating me and kicking my ass. And I feel like birth loves me and I love her and we'll just figure our dance out. I'm not worried about any of that. So yeah, I feel like I'm just in this kind of suspended space. Like everything's about to go down and I don't know what it'll look like, but I do feel like I'll be taken care of. It's just the bottom line is things are what they are. And I don't struggle with that. And maybe again, like that could just be like my total privilege and charmed life that I've lived that I can like say that so easily, but it also feels like deeply spiritual, like a deeply spiritual practice to live that way. And I don't want to discredit that about myself because it's not easy to be like that, but I have trained myself over a long period of time to not be in resistance to the way of things. You know, things are what they are. Like Byron Katie has been one of my most profound teachers, and her whole, lesson is loving what is. And that's been a huge practice of how can I love what is. And that's what's up. I mean, that's the work, and I feel like this pregnancy's been relearning that on a whole nother level. But yeah, things are what they are.
So, what's your vision for the birth?
I think it's going to be really romantic, like with myself.
Yeah? How
Yeah.
nice for you.
Like I picture like my mantras on and candles and just being very internal and just like getting down with it. I've wanted to know birth for so long. I mean, I've known it outside, but I've never experienced it. I just feel like I'm in such awe of it. How could that? It's just going to be romantic. I mean, it's going to kick my ass. I have
Totally.
no illusions about that. I don't think it's going to be like easy. But I don't have any fear of it. So I think that's when it can be really fun. And that's when, like, if I can just be like, let's do this, and welcome in that it's not just about meeting the baby, but that it's actually about experiencing birth.
Yeah.
And that really interests me. Like, of course, that's amazing that my baby's on the other side of that, but I can't even really understand that. That's like too much for me to even.
It's kind of an abstract
Yeah,
idea at this
I can't
point,
even
really.
like get that. But that I'm going to get to experience birth, this thing that connects all of us, that's brought every single person and animal here ever, that I get to have that privilege and experience and how that will change me. It's like walking through a portal or being thrown through a portal. It's crazy. So it's intimidating. I mean, it's like the complete unknown, but I do have a lot of experience with going into other paradigms and I kind of feel like I'll be okay.
You'll handle it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so what do you see as my role in this birth?
I think pretty much what you said earlier, like just to be present and witness and just be grounded and be the sweet, gentle, grounded person that you are to me already. I know how much you believe in me and I know I know how not afraid of my power and my wild woman, that how not afraid you are of that. And I think that's huge, to know that I can just like be completely uninhibited and just go there in front of you. And I don't have any like modesty stuff, I mean, we've talked about this of like, I don't want you to see certain stuff. Like, I don't feel any of that. I feel like I'm just so excited to be like a wild woman in front of you. And I don't know how could I know like what I'm going to want in terms of touch and talking. And, I've seen so many things like where the partner's breath is just like, no matter what he does, she just like can't handle how he smells in labor, even though he means well, or he just can't touch her the right way, or, whatever. So maybe we'll have some of that awkwardness, and maybe we won't. Maybe it'll be, where you're just totally locked in with me and I'm staring into your eyes and we're kissing, or maybe
a little of both.
Yeah, exactly. So the best thing is that I know you're so able to not be in your ego and to just be like, you got this, I'm here however you need. You're so able to do that.
Yeah, and you're very able to ask for what you need and to make very clear what you don't want.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm not going to have to guess.
Yeah.
And
exactly. So your role is like to listen to whatever that is.
Sure.
And then it'll be great.
Cool. So what is most important to you?
I think the thing that comes up for me a lot about what's most important to me is third stage and the baby coming out and me having the 3-foot halo around me and not being touched and not having anybody talk and not having anybody affect or change that energy. I've been to so many births where the baby comes out and it's like, oh my God, she's so beautiful. And other people are saying the baby's name and cameras are flashing, and everyone means well, usually in those situations. But, even I have taken that away from moms. Like, I have been the first person, again, with the best intentions, but I have been the person to talk first. And I feel horrible about that. I don't want that taken away from me. I want my voice to be the first thing that my baby hears.
Yeah.
And there's also like a very physiological protective logic to that too.
Sure.
That I do think third stage is best protected by just the mom and baby having their experience and the mom getting to go through all the stages of kind of the natural assessment or primal assessment that she makes of the baby. And I think that really protects the placenta and the bleeding and keeps all of that working together. So yeah, I think just like that being honored and my birth keepers having space and just feeling their feet on the ground and breathing and not inserting themselves into that. That's usually what comes up for me as the most important thing.
Got it. Understood. How has your definition of unassisted birth changed over the course of your pregnancy?
Well, I stopped using the word unassisted.
Right.
Right off the bat. I guess that's a big one. Probably just from a couple conversations with Sister Morningstar of being like, that's a ridiculous term. And we have so much assistance internally and ancestrally and biologically. And, my partner and my friends and midwife friends and family. And it's kind of a dumb term. So the literal definition has changed because I learned in this pregnancy that unassisted just was a governmental title for a birth that was unattended by a medical professional for paperwork. So it's like not applicable to the way that we talk about it. Also, I think it's just been really humbling to go through it myself. I mean, a huge thing as a birth worker that I've learned having my own pregnancy is I'm pretty embarrassed I ever have given anyone advice before. I wish that I had, I've just learned, it's just been so humbling to have this own experience and have the parts be like hard or heady and just see what uniqueness and what self-work is in this pregnancy. I regret not holding wider space for when women didn't know and instead being the authority and being so quick to like give tips and advice. which now that I've actually been pregnant is kind of laughable to me.
What, in the sense that you say it's okay not to know?
Yeah,
Or
like that.
those holes don't have to be filled
Yeah.
with tips?
And to give, like, to not take authority away from whatever, because that's the work. You know, this is just such deep work. And I, as a doula, have filled so much with being the authority and, like, here's the suggestions and here's how to connect a baby and here's the exercises you should be doing. And the biggest thing that I've learned in this pregnancy is you don't have to do anything. You literally don't have to do anything. And just get out of the way, you know, and listen to yourself and love yourself, and babies happen, you know, and pregnancy happens. And that's really been the most profound thing, to just continually learn that I don't have to do anything. It's been really freeing and beautiful. It is, how could it not be? It's just like deepened so much trust in my body and my baby and myself and my own guidance. I don't have to do yoga. I don't have to do 300 squats a day. I don't have to take this supplement or, you know, not eat this one food. Like, actually, nature and biology thrives in spite of, you know, all the things that we do to stand in its way.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's been really cool and really special as your partner to watch you navigate this pregnancy, and the way you've grown as a supporter of women and the way you've grown as a birth worker has been really remarkable to watch. And it's a privilege of mine. And I've just couldn't be more honored and humbled to be your partner through this process. I couldn't pick a better baby mama.
And you've loved how stony and spacey and
Oh my gosh,
stupid
yeah, we never even talked about that.
I've become.
She's always like the hummingbird, super fast, very clear, linear thinker, and I'm kind of like the slow dum-dum.
You're not the dum-dum, but you're definitely slower.
But man, those roles have swapped around.
Yeah.
She's like my turtle now. She just takes...
I can't finish my sentences.
Yeah, it's like you're stoned a lot.
You love it, though.
It's like great, because I'm always like, let's get it rolling, Emilee. Come on.
For the first time
chop,
ever.
Chop. For the first time ever.
Yeah. It's been fun. I can't believe
fun.
We're at the freaking end.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, we will check back in with you guys once the little tiger's here and share our birth story and let you know if it was romantic or not.
Right.
It might not have been. Maybe I'll throw up the entire time. That is not romantic. But thank you all for listening. And, you know, I do also just want to say, because this might be the last podcast before I give birth, I wanted to thank all of you for holding this space for us and for this baby. It's been so wild to have this virtual community that listens to these podcasts and that loves me and reaches out to me. And, you know, I'm constantly hearing from you guys, and it's just so cool. And I feel so held and supported by all of you as listeners and you know, as people in our Facebook group and my Instagram friends. And it's just so cool. So thank you for that. And you're all with us here in beautiful Hawaii, preparing for this incredible portal transitional experience.
Yeah, it's been so fun, and I've really appreciated all the stories that have been told on this podcast, and keep them coming. It's important. You women are amazing. And Emilee, thank you so much for having me on and sharing this time with me, and we'll keep you posted.
That's it for today, everyone. Join us next week for another episode of the Free Birth Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and remember, your body, your choice. Lots of love.